We read at Mass today a story from St. John's Gospel, a man born blind, and Jesus gives him the power to see. It's an important story, the longest account of one of Jesus' miracles in the New Testament. It tells us who Jesus is and who we are. It's a dramatic story. Different people comment, question, interact. There's the blind man himself, the parents, neighbors, the religious leaders, the Pharisees, Jesus' disciples, and of course Jesus himself. But we're in the story too, don't forget. The man's born blind. That's important. Jesus doesn't just restore the man's sight. He's blind from birth. He never had the power to see. So this is an act of creation. Only God can create something out of nothing. And Jesus gives him eyes to see. St. John's Gospel always reminds us that Jesus is God, God's Son. In other miracles, people come to Jesus or they're brought to him by someone else asking for healing. But here, Jesus goes to the blind man who hasn't asked for anything. In fact, afterwards, he's still not sure who Jesus is. So maybe we can say that the blind man represents all those who can do nothing for themselves, nothing but wait for the power of God to come to them. Which means the blind man could be all of us, and God comes to us, blind as we are. As the story begins, Jesus' disciples wonder as they pass the blind man whether he did something to deserve this, or are his parents responsible? No, Jesus says. He was born blind so that God's power might be displayed in curing him. God's power is greater than human sin. The Pharisees in the story don't want a cure to take place on a Sabbath day, but Jesus works the miracle on a Sabbath day because it's a day that God wants to give good things, especially to those who have nothing, like the poor blind man. Every day is a Sabbath day for God. The way the miracle unfolds is interesting. The man has his blindness, and Jesus takes some clay, and he spits on it, and he rubs it in the blind man's eyes. And he tells him to wash in the pool of Siloam, a pool that's not far from the temple in Jerusalem. Jesus often uses simple things to do something miraculous. The clay and the spittle remind us of God creating Adam from the dust of the earth and breathing his spirit into him. Bathing in water brings life. Again, the blind man represents us all. He's the human family that's lost its power to see. He's the human family that God seeks out to give it back its sight. As we listen to the Pharisees and the man's parents and the neighbors arguing about what's happened, we hear human beings everywhere trying to figure out what God is all about. Some believe, some don't. The final meeting of Jesus with the man is one we all hope to have. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Jesus says to him. He answers and says, who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? And Jesus says to him, you've seen him. The one speaking with you is he. He says, I do believe, Lord. And he worships him. This story is important, and I suggest you read it yourselves slowly. It's the whole 9th chapter of John's Gospel. It's a beautiful summary of the mission of Jesus Christ, and we can find ourselves in it.